Hey there guys, this is video 3, solving absolute value equations. We're going to use green paper today because, well, green is cool and it's the color of the Packers. So here we go. First of all, we're talking about absolute value. So when we're talking about absolute value, we're talking about the distance away from 0. Because we're talking about a distance, it's never going to be negative. So remember, absolute values can never equal a negative number. And be like walking backwards and saying that you walked a negative distance. It's still a distance that you walked. Okay, so we're going to start by evaluating this absolute value just to get the idea of them, and then we'll start solving the equations. Okay, so when we're evaluating, we want to first plug in the numbers that were given, just like back in video 1. So 8.4 minus 2 times my n value, which is negative 7.5. plus 5. So I've got all my stuff plugged in there. My absolute values are going to work similar to parentheses in order of operations, meaning I'm going to work inside those first. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the 2 and the negative 7.5, which gives me negative 15. And then I can add the negative 15 and the 5 to give me negative 10. And so the absolute value symbols have not gone away at all. And then once you get it down to a single number in your absolute value symbols, you can take the absolute value of the negative 10. So remember, absolute value is not negative. If it is negative inside here, we make it positive. So it's just 8.4 minus 10. And when you do that, you get negative 1.6. So if this would have been a positive 10 in here, this still would have been 10 down here, okay? Because absolute value is always positive. So if it's positive, leave it positive. If it's negative, make it positive. All right. Okay, so now we're going to start solving your absolute value equations. So when you are solving an absolute value equation, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your absolute value is by itself or it's isolated. Okay, the next thing that you want to do after you isolate your absolute value is make your two equations. Your first equation is going to be exactly the way it looks without the absolute value sign. The second one is going to be the same thing except this number would be negative. And then you're going to solve both those equations. Okay, so step 1, isolate the absolute value. In this case, the absolute value is by itself. I have nothing being added, multiplied, subtracted here or over here, and so my absolute value is the only thing on this side of the equal sign. So make two equations. My first equation would be x plus 12 equals 9. My second equation is x plus 12 equals negative 9. Okay, very important here. A lot of people skip this step and they just try and solve right from here. Okay, we always want to rewrite our two equations. All right, and then we're going to solve them. So minus the 12, so x is negative 3 for this one, and minus the 12, so x is negative 21. And there are your two solutions. Okay, next one we're going to look at. Okay, so step 1, isolate the absolute value. In this case, if we draw our imaginary line by the equal sign, there's a plus 8 here that's not in the absolute value symbol. So that's what we need to get rid of first. So think about solving an equation. We'd subtract the 8 to get rid of it because it's being added. So now I'm left with absolute value of 3x minus 2 equals 4. And now my absolute value is isolated. So now I can make my two equations. Okay, again, the absolute value sign didn't go away just by subtracting the 8. That's still there. It goes away when I make my two equations. Again, it's very important that you make those two equations and not just solve right from here and then solve both of those. So add the 2 on both sides. 3x equals 6, so x is 2. 3x equals negative 2, so x is negative 2/3 for your two answers. All right, before we go on to the next problems, did you know that banging your head into a wall for an hour will burn 150 calories? But I highly suggest against that, and instead you could walk your dog for 45 minutes and burn the same amount of calories. So much safer option there, walk your dog instead. All right, next two problems. We've got a -2 on the outside, and we want to get rid of that first. So we're going to divide by -2 because it's being multiplied by the absolute value. So we're going to divide by -2 here. When I do that, I'm left with absolute value of 5x plus 3 equals +4. So remember we talked about it not equaling a negative before? Well, it equals a negative here, but once I isolated the absolute value, it doesn't equal a negative anymore, so I can keep going. All right, so it's isolated. Make your two equations. 5x plus 3 equals 4, and 5x plus 3 equals -4. Subtract the 3 over, so 5x equals 1, so x is 1/5. And we're going to solve this one as well. So 5x equals -7, so x is -7/5. All right, number 5. Okay, if we look on this side of the equal sign, there's nothing outside the absolute value here or over here. Here's my line by the equal sign, so the absolute value is the only thing over here. So it's isolated, so I can actually make my two equations. Okay, this one's a little bit trickier though. So my first equation is going to be x plus 10 equals 4x minus 8. Okay, so that's my first equation. Nothing really changed. I just got rid of the absolute value signs. My second equation is going to be x plus 10, so I got rid of the absolute value signs, equals negative of the 4x minus 8. All right, so x plus 10 equals 4x minus 8. Solve that. Subtract the x over. And then I could add 8. So 18 equals 3x, so x is 6. And then here I can distribute this negative sign now to everything. So x plus 10 equals -4x plus 8. And I can add the 4x this time over to the other side. And subtract the 10. So x is -2/5. All right. Okay, last thing here that we're going to look at. Okay, so we're going to isolate the absolute value. So we have this -3 here. We're going to divide by -3. So that leaves me with absolute value of 2x plus 4 equals -4. My absolute value is isolated. There's nothing else here. Okay, but it's equal to a negative, so we are going to say no solutions for this one, because we cannot have an absolute value isolated and equal to a negative. Okay, so after isolating the absolute value, it cannot equal a negative. All right, and that is solving absolute value equations. We will catch you later.